You are listening to the Rewrite the Rules podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Beth.
I'm Natalie.
And I'm Harriet.
Rewrite the Rules podcast releases a new episode every Monday, and we're all about helping you achieve a happier and healthier relationship with food and your body.
We're real people with real life experiences, so you can expect us to be keeping it raw and real in each and every episode.
Don't forget to follow and subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you use, and share the love with a friend that you think will love this podcast.
Now, let's get on to the episode.
Hello guys, welcome back to the podcast.
Welcome back to Rewrite the Rules. Today we have a very special guest with us. We have Sophie. So Sophie is a therapist and a coach, and she specialises in eating disorder recovery. She carried out her qualifications in both the UK and the USA, which is very cool, Sophie. And I'm also so honoured to say Sophie is one of my friends. We had a very cute in-person friend date in Manchester in the summer, and that's where we found out how similar we were. We even showed up in pretty much the same outfit, and it was we did and it was a very beautiful moment. But we have been so keen to get Sophie on the podcast for months, because I think you just have a very amazing way of articulating your wisdom. So thank you so much for coming on, and welcome.
Aww, thank you. What a lovely introduction. Now I'm really excited to be here, and yeah, as you said, we've sort of developed a little friendship, haven't we? And yeah. I was telling my friend earlier, actually, I'm about to go on a podcast today, and like one of the girls, like I met up with her and we were wearing exactly the same thing. It was so weird.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be here and love what you guys do as well in sharing your messages.
We're so pleased. And yeah, I just honestly, that day that we had was like so fun. I felt like we were constantly being like, me too, oh my god, me too, I did that. And it was just cute,
it was weird.
It was weird,
which is the power of social media as well, though, right? Like I often talk about how social media can be a bad thing and how many harmful messages we can see on there, but also like it really does bring people together. It's a place to like connect and communicate when it's used in the right ways. So a good positive of social media.
Yeah, exactly. Well, me and Beth, obviously we met through work, but like we were only talking through like social media and like WhatsApp for months before we met in person.
And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have made this beautiful podcast.
Yeah. So
there we go.
Amazing. But Sophie, how about you start off with like sharing with our listeners kind of your background, why you chose like counselling as a profession to be qualified in, and then how did you end up being like specialised in eating disorder recovery?
Gosh, where do I even begin? So I guess I've just always been interested in psychology. I've always been a really curious person. When I was a kid, I would ask so many questions, and my grandma still to this day is like, yes, Sophie, you asked a lot of questions growing up. So I think it probably annoyed people at times, but I've probably just always had this like real drive for like understanding people, understanding the world. And it was probably in like sixth form that I just really had this interest of like studying psychology. As soon as I got to university, I was like, yeah, eating disorders, this is really like a fascinating kind of area for me to delve into. Managed to get some volunteer work at an amazing charity called First Steps, who actually offer their services kind of across the country now, which is awesome. And yeah, I just have so much empathy, I think, for people that are struggling with their relationship with food, and in particular how body image can impact that as well, like especially because of my own experiences. So once I'd studied psychology, I thought, okay, I really want to go into like helping people that are struggling with these kind of difficulties, whether it be eating disorders, body image, self-esteem stuff, and just found this amazing master's program in America, which I was so fortunate to be able to do, studying in America and then also working in Canada for a little bit. I think just gave me a glimpse of like how different cultures experience eating disorders, the differences, but then also like a lot of the similarities. I guess I'm only speaking from experience of like living in English speaking countries, but that today I've learned a lot from all of that. and then moved back to England about 3 years ago, just because I wanted to be closer to family, sort of in my late 20s now, so becoming a bit more, family oriented, and spent a couple of years working at a university counselling service. And then now I do half private practice, and then I'm also currently working on an inpatient ward for teenagers that struggle with anorexia. So that's where I am today. And yeah, just always wanting to learn more and explore more and connect more with people like you guys as well.
That's amazing. Your experience is just so rich, and the fact that you've done this work abroad as well. I'll be interested, obviously from what you said, your experiences in the Western world, being the UK, Canada, America. Would you say there's any differences between what you I don't know, America and Canada versus the UK in terms of struggles with eating and body image?
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. I feel like I'm still kind of figuring that out now. But from working in America, I guess the culture there is a bit more, people tend to be a bit more outgoing, don't they? They kind of, whether it be kind of authentic confidence or not, I'm not always too sure, but people are just a lot more sort of outgoing, out there. They kind of speak up a bit more, just from my own experiences of living in England. So I don't know whether that kind of plays into it as well, of people that maybe struggle with that kind of thing in England. They might tend to be more reserved, and they might not necessarily speak out about things. Another thing I would say is a big one is that just this kind of stigma around mental health in the UK is quite obvious when you've lived in America and Canada. I think that there is less stigma over there. I mean, it's quite an American thing to say, isn't it? That you have a therapist, or that you spoke to your therapist, which we might laugh about in ways, but I also really appreciate that there's a lot less judgment around that. Whereas I guess in England, we probably still have more of those messages of keep calm and carry on, come on, just get on with it, or pull yourself together. We hear those phrases all of the time. And I think in a way that keeps us stuck in not necessarily acknowledging mental health in a way that we could be. That being said, I think we've done so much as a country, and I think we have a long way to go, but I also think it's important to acknowledge we're getting there. Yeah. But there is that cultural difference that I see that plays out. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Yeah, I guess back in the day, therapy here and mental health was super stigmatized, and it was that kind of cliche, in America and in the movies and TV shows, it's like you said, they talk about having therapy and their therapist in quite an open way. But also, like you said, it's the progress I think that we've made is amazing. More people are talking about how it's cool to see a therapist, it's cool to take care of your mental health, which is incredible.
I think it's just so crazy, and I didn't even think about the differences within the cultures until you just brought it up. And I definitely think back to my perceptions before I met Harriet, before I joined the internet. I definitely had a perception about therapists that were just from movies. Maybe it was a older middle-aged woman who was sitting in the chair in a corner and stuff. And I think there's also an issue with whenever anyone has reached out for help through things like our wonderful NHS and stuff, I've heard so many horror stories about people being shut down or not being enabled access to it in the first place.
Yeah, definitely just kind of shutting things down more. And then the other thing I was thinking is as we are quite a reserved culture and also kind of a self-deprecating culture, it's very acceptable to put ourselves down. It's almost used as a joke, isn't it? Of oh, that person's really funny because they say nasty things about themselves. And whilst that sometimes is funny, I also think it's then a bit more frowned upon to be more complimentary towards ourselves. So I don't know, growing up for me, it was so normal for people to be oh, I look horrible in that picture. I remember all my friends at school, like everybody would say the same thing. And so it almost felt wrong to be like, oh, I actually quite like the way I look in that picture. You felt a bit like cocky. And yeah, it doesn't really make sense now that like I'm older and now that I've sort of, as you say, Beth, been exposed more to this kind of community.
The two things I was thinking of there is, first of all, like when you get a compliment and it feels like the normal response is no. And the other thing I was thinking of, like I remember growing up where people would say, oh, I'm allowed to say mean things about myself. It's okay because I said it. You know, we can recognize that if someone else said this to like us, that would be uncool, but we're allowed to like talk shit about ourselves. That's absolutely fine. And obviously working in like the mental health space now, I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, it's absolutely not okay to talk to yourself in that way.
I remember hearing a lot of people saying, well, I'm going to call myself this so that if and when someone else calls it me, it doesn't hurt because I've already said nothing about myself.
Yeah, that is so true. I was just going to say as well, like it's almost a protective mechanism, isn't it? Of like, well, I said it. So, you know, that if anybody else says it, at least I was the first one to say it. At least I already put that out there. Or maybe if I say it, people will not make that comment because I've already said it. Yeah. So it acts as this protective mechanism. But then the reality is you are sharing that language with yourself more and more and more, maybe even on an everyday level. And so subconsciously, I think your self-esteem and your self-worth can just kind of sink without even necessarily recognizing it. You know, when you think about it like that, it's kind of like, wow, I'm actually like bullying myself here. And I'll say to clients as well, like, if you spoke to yourself the way that you spoke to somebody else, like that would be considered abuse. So why are you like abusing yourself? And I know that's like kind of an intense thing to say, but sometimes it gives us that reality check, like, oh my gosh, you know, I would feel absolutely terrible if I ever said that to somebody else, or if I saw that happening. So like, how does it make it okay for me to be kind of turning that around onto my relationship with me?
Yeah, it's so true. It's like that TikTok trend. I think it's actually quite a helpful one where it's like, oh, when you say X to yourself, you're also saying that to your younger self, and then people show like a picture of their like your baby self, and it's just like, oh.
And I think it just forces you to, instead of seeing yourself as this adult version, reflect back on your younger, vulnerable self and just realize that that person is still inside. So why are we being mean to ourselves in this way? I just think it's so heartbreaking.
I know.
Yeah. And at what point does it change? At what point do we go from, I guess, being a lot more carefree to being a lot harsher on ourselves? I guess it kind of depends for everybody, doesn't it? It's probably more around like our teenage years when our hormone levels start to change, and apparently there's like a specific hormone level that contributes towards us like comparing ourselves to others a lot more. I guess kids can also just be really mean, can't they? So it's probably around the time that we've started to internalize those messages. But yeah, I don't know about for you guys, but I'm so fascinated by like inner child work, and I guess that is just an example of that, isn't it? Of like seeing that picture of yourself and then almost saying like what you say to yourself now to that child. Like that would probably be such an emotional experience.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah.
It's I remember seeing this quote like years ago, like before inner child stuff was cool, and it said something like, be who your younger self needed. And I remember it blew me away. I just thought it just activates, I guess, your inner adult, I know this might sound woo-woo, but like your higher self. I think it also activates that protective mechanism of, oh yeah, I have to look after, you know, that little version of me, that younger version of me, which is you. And I think it just activates this very nurturing component of yourself. So I love inner child work.
Yeah, I really like those different phrases as well, of like your inner child, your inner adult, your higher self, because we do have that, and it's just about accessing that more. But I think when we are just literally like hit in the face with all of these messages of like what our body should look like, how we should eat, how we should exercise, how we should do this, it distracts us. It's like all this external noise, and it takes us away from like just being able to like trust ourselves and like be in touch with ourselves and access that higher self, that sort of, you know, encouraging, compassionate, curious way of thinking that we need in order to like heal our relationship with our body or with food or whatever it is that we're struggling with.
I recorded an inner child meditation the other day, soon
Did
to be
you?
released. Yeah. Should I say it?
Putting
like,
the feelers out there.
just putting the feelers out there. But yeah, it even made me emotional when I was like recording it, because you know, you go through this whole process of like thinking about a younger version of you, and then getting to the point where, you know, in your imagination you meet that younger version and like you hug. Oh, it's too much, but it's amazing.
No, I love that, because that is you, isn't it? Like we all have that inner child like still within us. We just look different. We just like we're more grown, we're more developed, but that part of you, like that's really at the core of who you are. Those years are some of the most important in your life. And yeah, I love that. I can't wait to listen to it.
I'll send it to both of you. But Sophie, do you think that the inner child work could help someone build a better body image?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if it kind of just goes along with what we're saying there of like getting in touch with your inner child again and speaking to yourself with more compassion, you know, the only thing that's changed is the way that you look, but who you are still really remains the same. So I think when it comes to building a better body image, like such a key component of that is that self-compassionate talk. And if we can kind of get into the practice of doing that more and more and more, and, you know, also sort of kind of change our value system as well. Like when we're kids, we love to play, we love to create, we love to just talk. Like I feel like a lot of kids, they just kind of talk to whoever, they do whatever, they say whatever. And when we kind of value those things again, instead of valuing so much the way that we look, everything changes there, and we can kind of let go of that need to fit to the beauty ideal, to fit in with this specific criteria that society sets out for us, and that changes constantly. So it's literally impossible to keep up with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just such a great place for people to start, because I know maybe as your adult self, like thinking, oh, I have to start being more compassionate towards myself as I am now. Maybe for some that feels like very difficult and it doesn't feel genuine to do that. But if you think about the younger version of yourself, it's like, well, maybe that's just a good place to start and start activating that compassionate talk.
Yeah, I think that's so helpful in just trying to bridge the gap. That's what you were ever trying to do. And I completely sympathize that it may feel really inauthentic to possibly being so negative to yourself, to then be like, oh, we're going to be nice to her now, and we're going to be like really give her a hug and everything. It's going to feel strange, it's going to feel inauthentic and weird. So just maybe envisioning your younger self, whether it's 5, 10, 15-year-old version of you, because like they are all valid, loving younger versions of yourself. Just envisioning that, I think, would just be really good, like bridging that gap and making a start.
Yeah, I love how you put that, bridging the gap, because it's like that I guess it's like that when you struggle with your body image, I guess it's that disconnect between yourself and your body.
And we have to think about realistic ways of doing it as well, don't we? Like if you are coming from that place of just real severe self-criticism, as you say, like it may just not feel genuine, authentic at all to like all of a sudden switch it up. And I often say to clients, like, it's not even about going from like this very negative place to this very positive place. Like, but if we can get somewhere in the middle of like neutrality or just acceptance, just instead of kind of like slating yourself so much, like maybe that's a better goal to work towards, instead of just being like, oh my God, I just all of a sudden like love myself now. And I guess a lot of like body positivity messages on the internet can sort of encourage that, you know, we need to be thinking about like loving our bodies every single day, loving the way that we look like. And that just isn't always realistic. I don't personally know if it's realistic for anybody, because we're always changing. We all experience negative thoughts at times, but if we can work towards kind of accepting our bodies and just kind of developing that appreciation for ourselves a little bit more, that gratitude is a gateway emotion for more of those positive emotions. So I think that would be a great place to start if you are really struggling with the self-criticism.
Yeah, definitely. And I think realistic guidance on improving your body image is key, because I know myself, like, you know, when I was like super struggling with my body image, if someone just told me, just love yourself, I actually would have probably like irritated me, or I would have just probably just like rolled my eyes and thought, yeah, okay. But Sophie, you mentioned body neutrality. What is that? For people who don't know.
Body neutrality. Yeah. So body neutrality sort of sits under body acceptance, which is basically this idea that our bodies are neither good nor bad. They are just our bodies. And so body neutrality can kind of help us to like accept our bodies for what they are, whilst also like not paying too much attention to it. So it might be somewhere that does feel more realistic to start as well, where, you know, instead of looking in the mirror for several hours a day, or instead of, you know, checking what your hair looks like, or just body checking, or constantly having those negative thoughts, you're kind of like refocusing or redirecting your attention elsewhere. So many of us value appearance and aesthetics so much, and actually when we think more about our lives, our relationships, our career, the things that we really like to do at the weekend, hobbies, interests, just whatever it is, when we actually give ourselves an opportunity to like delve into more of that I suppose in itself is like practicing body neutrality.
So would you say like focusing on your like your skills or your personality, that would be a way to kind of focus more on body neutrality, because you're just taking that attention away from your body?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Like, and you know, it could be your skills, but it could also be just trying something else out that maybe you haven't before. Like, you know, speaking of inner child work, a lot of that does involve like being playful and being creative. So, you know, maybe it's just doing like a wholesome activity. I recently went and did some like pottery with my friends, or like doing a bit of artwork, or going to a dance class. Just anything like that doesn't even have to be something that you're quote unquote like really good at, just as a way to be like, oh, like my body can actually do so much more than just like take a picture or stand still or look in the mirror. My body can actually like serve me in so many other ways. And when we start doing that, I guess that's also an opportunity to really like realize, wow, like my body is this vehicle. I don't know if you've heard of like the researchers Lindsay and Lexi Kite, but they always talk about my body being a vehicle, or like my body being an instrument, not an ornament. You know, so it really propels us through life, and that in itself is just so cool, because we get to do all these amazing experiences with our bodies, even just from like being able to see or hear or taste or touch, you know?
Absolutely. Like Beth, I think you do really well, like the kind of fun and playful like way of like moving your body through, like, what was it called? Is it the wee dance, or what's it called?
Yes, I do just dance. I absolutely love it. But then I do like the ring fit as well. And I love it so much. And I don't know sort of at what point, because I love body neutrality so much. And it was so helpful for me to once again go from sort of body negativity to more of a positive perspective. And that's when I sort of started attempting to move my body in different ways. I'd started skipping and tried running and tried doing a bit of everything. But also it just really helped me sort of wake up in the morning and look at my body and just have no response, to be like, right, how I feel right now isn't going to affect how I eat. It isn't going to affect how I move my body. It's not going to affect my clothing choice or how I choose what exercise I choose today. It just allows you to sort of like continue your day and have the happiest and most enjoyable day without, feeling any type of way. And I just love it so much.
Oh, I love
Absolutely.
that so much. That is amazing that helped you in that way of like just detaching the negative thoughts from that experience of looking at yourself in the mirror in the morning, and then that being able to allow you to like do so many things that maybe you would have like not done or prevented yourself from. Because I guess that is the thing with negative body image as well, right? It stops us from being able to do the things that we really, really want to do, which is heartbreaking, and that sucks, and we shouldn't be living our lives like that. So yeah, I think it's a great place to start. And I also think it's important to know that like body neutrality, body acceptance, sort of more of like the positive body image as well, of like, if you do have those thoughts of like, oh, I love how I look today, like those things can all coexist together. And it's up to you to choose like, okay, which one do you kind of align more with on that day? It may be that, you are feeling like really good about the way that you look, which is not a bad thing at all. But on those days where maybe that feels a little bit harder or whatever, just know that like there's other angles that you can take with this. And that, I think, it's so empowering to know that we have that choice and that they're very like overlapping as well.
Yeah, like there's not just one single way. You may be someone who resonates more with body neutrality and that gives you energy. Or, I do know people who just get energy from that self-empowerment movement. And neither's right or wrong. It's just what you align with and what makes you feel good.
I also think I'd probably describe it as fluid, as in one day you may wake up and just accepting your body feels more authentic, whereas the next day you may be feeling, like you said, really, really positive. But also, I found sometimes it can literally change hour to hour, and just being calm along that ride, I think, is just like the most important sort of aim.
Body image can often be like emotions. Like sometimes you wake up and you're in a bad mood and you don't know why, and you're just in a bad mood. It's like sometimes you can wake up and you're not having the best body image day, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's like likewise, if you wake up in a bad mood, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It's just kind of human.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think sometimes it can feel really scary. Like I even wake up, and have these thoughts about my body in quite a negative way. And I guess as like a professional, it sometimes feels like wrong or like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. Maybe I shouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing. But actually, no, like we are all human, and paralleling it with like having those bad moods or having those good moods or just having like an mood, it can just be exactly like that. And that word fluid, that's so, I love that too, because it's like we don't have to put ourselves into these different boxes all of the time. We just get to choose what feels most helpful to us, like literally in that moment. And also I think like, I guess just from a personal level, it's not so much about like the negative thoughts that you're having, because of course like those thoughts are always going to pop up, like they're kind of like intrusive thoughts, aren't they? But it's how we go about them. It's like, are we going to attach onto them and spiral out of control for the rest of the day, or are we going to kind of just like sit with ourselves for a second, acknowledge how we're feeling, maybe do a bit of like reframing, or you might just even write some things down in your journal, have a chat with somebody that like you can really trust on this topic, and work through it. And what I found personally is, instead of things kind of ruining my whole day, I might be struggling with something for half an hour or an hour, and then I can get on with the rest of my day. And that's when I'm like, okay, like I've made progress here. And it's not about never experiencing these thoughts. It's about how do we deal with them? How do we like get back up and essentially just be resilient?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's like stop trying to perfect body image, essentially, because
Yes.
it can't be perfected. It's not meant to be perfected. It doesn't need to be perfected. You're allowed to have that fluid human experience because that's what you will have. You're a human. It's not trying to get rid of it. It's learning to manage it. So like exactly like you said, Sophie, when you get those automatic thoughts, it's thinking, how can I best respond to that thought? How can I look at that in a different way? And actually question it. just because you've had an automatic thought that says something doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, I think that's such a mic drop statement. Like, stop trying to perfect body image, because everything that we put out there like just gets caught up by this vicious perfectionism, which is such like a societal level thing as well, isn't it? And just on that, like automatic thoughts, I guess there's kind of, for me, I'm just thinking of like two ways of dealing with it. And it's whatever feels most helpful for you. Maybe you're having those thoughts and you're like, you know what, I need to question these and I need to kind of ask myself some questions. But I think in order to do that, you need to kind of be in a reasonably calm state, because when we feel anxious, we question, and then like there's thoughts and thoughts and thoughts. And it's like, is this right or is that right? And it's just like everything's going kind of crazy all at once. So if you're kind of able to sort of like physiologically calm yourself down, then that would be like a great place and a great like journaling opportunity. And also we might just have a thought and then visualize ourselves like throwing it in the bin or like deleting it as if it's like a junk, like a, you know, like a email or something that we really don't need in our inbox. It's like, okay, had that thought, like click, I'm gonna, almost like visualizing yourself doing that, you know? So I guess those are like two different ways in which you could cope with that.
Yeah, I did a TikTok on that the other week. I did a TikTok on how being able to understand the difference between like a spam email thought and then a primary email thought, and trying to get to know what kind of thoughts do you have that would be considered like a spam email thought, and literally treating it like spam email. I know that I can go through my spam inbox and just like look at them, but I don't engage with them. I don't click on them. Don't click on spam emails, guys. And it's exactly kind of how I would say try one approach of treating like spam thoughts. Like, don't engage. You don't need to engage with them. Don't click on them. Don't believe them.
That's interesting. How do you differentiate? I'm curious to know about this TikTok.
So I think it's like kind of like recalling back and what kind of thoughts have you had in the past? Because we likely have like reoccurring thoughts. A journaling exercise to do is maybe thinking about that. What kind of thoughts do I have that are unhelpful, that don't have value to them, that I can consider like spam emails? And if you can acknowledge them, write them down, then when you next have them, you're more likely to be able to capture and be like, oh yeah, that was a thought that we now understand isn't helpful.
Yeah, I guess helpful and then unhelpful. And, you know, there's probably some sort of in between as well, of like more of those just like neutral thoughts, like thoughts just being silly thoughts, whatever. But I know for me, like when I'm like, that's not helpful, that's such a like a trigger for me to then be like, okay, so like if it's not helpful, why am I like ruminating about it? Because whatever answer I get to with this, like it's still not going to be helpful. So that's a really good exercise.
It's a different way of filtering your thoughts, I guess, so that you can manage them, and also just not get so offended by them, because like you said, like sometimes we have really weird intrusive thoughts and it's like, hold on a minute, where did that come from? And I don't need to absorb that today.
Exactly. Yeah. See you later. Delete it. Goodbye.
Delete.
Being like humorous about, is that a word? Humorous?
Yeah.
Yes. Being humorous about those thoughts as well. Like sometimes they can feel so scary, but then it might be that like you say that thought out loud to somebody and then like just laugh about it, or you might like say it in like a funny voice. I think that there's so much power in just like being silly and almost laughing at our thoughts as well, because like, wow, like that's taking so much hold over me and it's literally not true. Which is something that I do really like about British culture, actually. Like we can be really sarcastic, and I think in some ways it can help, you know?
Yeah, having that humor approach to it can definitely be a way to cope better, especially if you have like weird ones. This was such an amazing conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Sophie, thank you so much for coming on, because like it's amazing how we're like having a fluid conversation like this, where it ends up, you know, like we didn't plan to talk about inner child work or spam emails, but here we are.
Here we are, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's so true. Like when it comes to body image, it really is just like any other, mental health difficulty that we experience, and we can actually apply so many of the same things to this topic in general. So yeah, I'm glad that this conversation did go where it did today, and hopefully there's some takeaways for people to kind of have a go at practicing if they want to. And yeah, we're all just on a journey with body image healing, and some days are better than other days, and that's totally okay. We just don't need to try and sort of perfectly perfect our appearance or even our relationship with our bodies.
I was about to ask you, like, what would be like the one thing that you would tell our listeners who are struggling with body image right now? But I feel like that's such a good one. Stop trying to perfect like your body image.
It is so true. Let's just stop trying to perfect the way that we see ourselves and perfect our mental health and this and that. Like, it's okay. One of the most powerful things I find, like in therapy in general, is just that validation and that normalizing, and going back to like some of the body positivity messages that just feel a bit too simplistic. It annoys us because I think it feels so invalidating, and that's just not a good place to start with all of this. We need to acknowledge how we feel. We need to come together. We need to challenge beauty ideals. And if that means feeling angry about the way in which you feel like you've been told to look, like, let's like experience that and let's feel those things out, being as conscious as we can be about it, but knowing that it's okay for it to not feel like perfect all of the time.
Absolutely loved listening to you talk. It was so nice to meet you. And I honestly feel like I've learned so much from this episode, and I am feeling so inspired. So I cannot wait to see how our audience feels about this episode as well.
Yeah, I was saying to Beth, I was like, Sophie is so Moorish. Like, I'm just like, I want to hear more. I want to hear more from you.
Oh, that's so nice. No, it's been so lovely to speak to you both as well. I think it's important to have these conversations with like-minded people and people that, want to kind of do this work, because when you start talking, like, all of these ideas come to the surface, and I don't always get the opportunity to do that. So hopefully for the listeners as well, you can kind of start stirring some of your own ideas up, and like message, get in touch, like get connected with people. That's really how I think we come together in all of this. So yeah, I've learned so much from both of you as well. Thank you.
And Sophie, where can people find you? People want to work with you. How can they do that?
Yeah, so I offer individual therapy, individual therapeutic coaching, and then I also offer workshops online, but also in schools and different organizations. You can find me as _eating disorder therapist on Instagram. And then my website is foodbodyself.co.uk.
Oh, I love that. Food, body, self.
Thank you.
You go, girl. Oh, I love that. I'll make sure that's all linked and put in the description as well, so easy access.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. We'll have to get you on again in the future. Thank
I'm
you.
down. Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.